Welcome to the Streets and People podcast presented by Get Around Cabo Car Free. Get Around Cabo Car Free is a volunteer community movement advocating for more transport options for people who can't drive in Caboolture and Morayfield in Queensland. In today's podcast, we'll be covering one of these three broad topics. It might be Road Rules 360, where we discuss Queensland's road rules, the legislation, the design for people walking, biking, in wheelchairs or on a scooter. It might be Not Everyone Drives, where we chat with people whose transport options don't include a car in a car-dependent society. And it might be People and Projects, where our conversations are with people working on a specific aspect of inclusive transportation. My name's Wendy. We're doing People and Projects. It's our very first episode today. We are here on Gubbi Gubbi country in Caboolture in Queensland. I realise we haven't been doing an acknowledgement of country, and I very much respect our elders past, present and emerging, and actually for taking care of country for 65,000 years, which doesn't seem to be something that us white people are any good at. We're not going to make it another part of 60 years. Now, our first person is John Burrill, who is co-host of our other series called Road Rules 360. And John has special co-host privileges. Normally, I would interview people who are talking about walking, cycling, wheelchairs, scooters, public transport, and maybe urbanism, not so much motorbikes. But you have special privileges, so today we're including motorbikes. Maybe introduce why you started the group and how long you've been riding a motorbike. What was the background to that?
Okay, it's probably a long story which I'm happy to cut short. My name's John Burrill. I've been riding motorcycles for 51 years. Sounds a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous. 51 years, 68, and I hope I'm still going to be riding motorcycles in another 15 or 20 years' time. Might have to give up one day, but certainly not for a long time yet. Yes, I've been involved in a range of different groups that involve motorcycling, but the current group that I'm part of and help to run is called Helping New Motorcyclists. I mean, motorcycling itself is fun. You can just do it for whatever reason, just to clear your head. It's not necessarily a mode of transport. It's more, in many ways, just a lifestyle. You enjoy motorcycling. You get out, you see the sights, you make new friends. Queensland is on its own nationally in this respect. If you're a learner motorcyclist, you have to be accompanied by another motorcyclist. That's a legal requirement. So for the first 3 months, and 3 months is the minimum period of time that you're a learner, basically you have to have somebody riding along, or not necessarily on a bike, you can be in a car, but a supervisor has to be there with you while you're riding if you're a learner. This presents a little bit of a problem for somebody that wants to learn to ride a motorbike but hasn't got any motorcycling friends. That's where our group comes in. Our main reason for existing is help support new motorcyclists, learner riders, in accompanying them for their first baby steps in riding a motorbike.
When you were saying that, I remembered decades and decades ago, I read a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. That's a true baby boomer classic. Book. It's very famous. Was it M. Scott Peck or was it Robert Pirsig? And my favourite line, and probably the only thing that I remember from that book, was the idea that when you're in a car, you are basically looking out to the world as if it's a television screen. Mm-hmm. And when I had a Vespa for a short period, 10 years ago, that was in New South Wales, I was living there, mm-hmm. and I was a uni student, and it was really cheap to run. It was really handy for me at that time. I absolutely got that sense of feeling connected with the environment.
Yes,
that was really,
absolutely.
I really loved that. But my family were completely delighted and huge sighs of relief when I said, I'm going to get rid of the Vespa, because actually I'm a really bad rider. I'm a really bad car driver. People always talk about how great they are at driving and riding, but I'm the first to admit I'm really bad at it. I wanted to ask, because now that you and I have been co-hosting Road Rules 360 for a little while, I've mentioned Helping New Motorcyclists, and no one has heard of you. That's first up. And the other thing they say is, I'm involved with this Ulysses Club. Now, I don't know what that is. How do you differentiate between perhaps what you do to Helping New Motorcyclists, Ulysses, and I don't know, what other clubs are there, and what is the difference?
Loads of different groups. We are essentially a Facebook group. Ulysses, it's a long-running club set up with chapters all across the country. A lot of people in our group are also members of Ulysses, but there's loads and loads of different groups. Some groups mainly made up of young folk who just want to scream over the horizon at 160, other groups that specialise in old motorcycles or historic vehicles, and the list goes on. You can think of all sorts of different. Dirt riding is another thing, off-road. There's clubs and groups that cater for those people. There's people that like to go away for long periods and very long rides, maybe away for a week or so, camping and what have you. Those people have specific groups that they belong to as well. Helping New Motorcyclists, it's pretty self-explanatory. That's what we do. We do other things as well, but that's our reason for being.
Yeah, often you'll say to me when we meet on the Monday morning, because John and I meet every Monday morning for Road Rules 360, he's very generous with his time and offers all of our Road Rules 360 podcasts out of his own time. There's no money, there's no exchange here. This is an act of love.
We're
on
volunteers.
his part. Yeah, absolutely. So you often say that you have gone for a ride, or you do a charity ride, or...
Well, we do a lot of organised group rides. It's probably the best way for new riders to gain experience. Sure, you can go out in small groups or even one-on-one, and usually we start off that way, like a brand new learner will join the group, post up, help, I live in the XYZ suburb, is there a supervisor here who could take me out? Because if there isn't, then they're stuck at home and they can't ride their motorbike for 3 months, which is a crazy situation, but we won't go there.
No, we're all about
Queensland
sharing the
rule.
love. It is, we're sharing the love, sharing the
right.
love, sharing the love.
That's right. One-on-ones where we start off usually. I've got one this afternoon, going to take a guy out for a bit of a ride. I've taken him a few times. He's struggling a little bit, but he'll come good with a bit of experience. More confidence they gain, the more we would be inviting them to join our formal group rides, which can be anything from 10 riders to 50 or 60 riders organised by our group. There's a lot of rules and regulations that we impose on ourselves for these group rides. We have a leader, obviously. We have what we call techs, which is tail end Charlie. If there's more than 20 people, we would usually have 2 tail end Charlies in high-vis vests, so all the riders between the leader and the tech are in the group ride, so to speak.
For safety, for conviviality,
That's right. And enjoying time with friends. We usually have shorter routes, anything up to the maximum of about 250 kilometres, but usually between 100 and 150 kilometres would be a standard formal group ride. We would usually go and have a cup of coffee or lunch, meal somewhere at a destination, and then ride back again. The routes are all posted. We have a pre-ride brief. There's always new people that come on the ride. We always make sure that everybody listens to the pre-ride brief. So we talk about safety, we talk about riding in a staggered formation wherever it's appropriate. We make sure everybody's aware that it's not a race. The leader will be travelling at or below the speed limit. Occasionally the lead rider will stop and make sure everybody's caught up. As soon as the lead rider sees the 2 tail end Charlies with their high-vis vests on and waving, then we carry on again. So we make sure we stay together. We use corner markers, which works very well. The lead rider coming up to a turn will just point. The rider directly behind stops on the side of the road, turns the indicators off and points left or right with their arm, indicating to the rest of the following riders which direction to take at that intersection. As the tail end Charlies come up, they hang back and the corner marker then moves into the back of the group. It's very, very good system.
So you started it, I think you said 3-4 years ago?
3.5 years ago we've been going on this particular group, yes. Been involved in other groups. There was a little bit of a falling out, I don't mind admitting that, with some of the leaders in the previous group I was part of. And in the end, myself, my wife and another person decided that we would form our own group and do it our way. And we've gone from strength to strength. We've got about 7,500 members now, or 7,300 members. Obviously not all of them are active. I wouldn't want to take a 7,000 rider group out somehow, but most of our group rides are between 20 and 40 riders in the group.
We're here in Moreton Bay. You have people who are probably in Brisbane. And where else have you got people? And maybe where do you have gaps that you would like to have some people come?
Southeast Queensland is sort of our main area that we operate in, but we do have members all over Queensland. There's people from Mount Isa, there's people from Townsville and Mackay, people from Cairns who are members of our group. It's quite difficult for them though. Well, I suppose as our numbers grow, it becomes less difficult because there's more people in their local area to be able to either supervise learners or be supervisors for learners. And that's all it takes. There's two lots of people in our group. You're either a supervisor. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I need to qualify that. You've got the learners, who are usually people who are brand new to motorcycling and have had their learner licence for up to 3 months. And there's supervisors. To be a supervisor, the only qualification you need is to have held your open motorcycle licence for that particular class of motorcycle for 12 months or more. You then become a supervisor. There's a group of people in between. They're part of the group as well, and they're basically people who have got their first motorcycle licence, but they haven't held it long enough to be able to supervise.
Right.
There's a lot of very active people in the group who fit that category, and they're often the ones who fill up our group rides because the L plate's gone, they don't need to be supervised, but they still enjoy the company of the group rides. They enjoy riding their bike when they can. We do midweek rides and weekend rides, all different days. There's a leadership group and people who help with the leading and with the organisation of the groups. We're affiliated with other groups. Groups come and go all the time.
And what would you say is a common maybe issue you see that when people are brand new motorbike riders, there is this learning curve where you start, you're super careful.
Yes. Yeah.
And there are probably common traps that people fall into in that space. And then there's this transition where you start to get a bit of confidence, but you don't yet have the skill set.
Yes.
What do you notice about people who are in that beginning stage and the middle stage? And what do you look for when you go, yes, this person's got it? What are those?
The first thing that comes to my mind is that there is a lot of different types of people out there. Some pick up motorcycling very quickly, want to go on and do big things and want to race, do all sorts of crazy things. There's another group of people, more mature folk, who either just want to commute cheaply or just want to enjoy motorcycling at the weekend, social events and riding. It's pretty hard to pick who's going to be in what group and what category. There's groups that cater for a whole range. I mean, one of the things I didn't mention was sports bike riders. There's a lot of people who go on track days. There's 2 or 3 motorcycle racing tracks around the place where if you want, you can go, you can pay a fee for a licence and make sure you've got all the right gear, and you can go be taught how to race around a racetrack. My racing days are over. You have to be a very careful rider in order to stay injury free. There's a lot of discussion and you hear lots of people saying, motorcycling's dangerous, you shouldn't be doing that because you're going to fall off and hurt yourself. And there's an element of truth in that. A lot of people who are inherent risk takers are drawn to the whole thing of motorcycling, potentially dangerous pastime. But one of my favourite statements is it doesn't have to be the case, because you can reduce the risk quite significantly by learning how to do things safely, how to ride defensively, how to stay upright and not fall off. If you do that, then A, you generally prolong your life, and B, it's actually a lot more enjoyable to do that. I have just as much fun travelling at 60 kilometres an hour as I do at 160.
160?
On a racetrack. Once upon a time. Story.
Amma. He knows better than that. He's a naughty boy. So speaking of speed, so there's a guy who lives in my street, just on the opposite side. You can see his fence in front there. And he has a new motorbike. And as he comes out in the morning, I had to have words with him because I was going, gee, that's pretty offensive. Internal combustion engine on a motorbike is fully exposed, so it's not like a car where you can rev, and yes, I feel it, but it doesn't have quite that piercing ring that I get on a motorbike. So this guy, he comes out and he goes, vroom!
Bung your ears up because it's offensive.
Well, it's not just my ears, but it's my body. Luckily, on this podcast, he hasn't gone out this morning, or he's already left, or whatever it is. But definitely I hear it, and I did go over there, and he goes, can you hear that? Because the motorbike helmet is fully encompassing of the ears. The sense of dampening of the noise is...
That's true. There's a saying which I absolutely do not agree with. People say loud pipes save lives because they think that if people can hear them, then they're going to make way for them, not knock them over. There's absolutely no evidence at all to say that that's correct. But it is a thing with a lot of motorcyclists put aftermarket exhaust pipes on their motorcycles in order to make them much, much louder than they are when they're bought. The motorcycle that you buy out of the shop is never that loud. Sometimes you can get a nice sound and it's a thump or it's a growl or whatever, but it's never offensively loud. The reason you hear offensively loud motorcycles is because people have put aftermarket exhaust pipes on to make them so. I really hate obnoxiously loud exhaust pipes.
Oh, I'm so glad you said. Now, I used to have a Vespa. So
lovely thing. So did I, actually. You know, my very first motorcycle was a Vespa 90.
That was like an old one.
Oh,
that was one of the ones with a spare tyre underneath. Mine used to have one of those. The difference between high beam and low beam was about a metre.
When I got it, it didn't last very long. A few trips down the back lanes, and I was only 16 at the time over in the UK. The tyre was flat. And I thought, how do I pump it up? That's how ignorant I was back then. Oh, I've got to pump the tyre up. How do you do that? Dad, help.
When I got it, I just had to try and get some skill up. So I used to go down to the local car park at Sunday morning at 6 a.m. or something. Just go round and round and round and round and round. Is that what you commonly do?
Oh, absolutely. We have a special event that happens on Sundays once a month, which we call Slow Moves. And it's something that you have to be able to do to get your motorcycle license. A lot of slow type manoeuvring, figure of eights, slalom run between cones, emergency stopping, riding very slowly, slow walking pace and staying upright, learning how to swerve to dodge obstacles. There's a lot of techniques and skill, and we put on an hour and a half session one Sunday morning a month for people to partake in that. It's essential. A lot of people, they say it's easy to ride fast in a straight line, but what about manoeuvring this big heavy machine around your garage or on your steep driveway or whatever? There's always a challenge there, and we help to build people's confidence by putting on these slow moves events. It doesn't have to be a special event. Just at the weekend, in fact, there was a couple of learners who were coming up to doing their licence soon, and they just wanted a refresher. So what we do, we just jump into a local empty car park and we just go through all of these manoeuvres. You don't even have to have the cones there. There's ways of setting up, doing these manoeuvres in a car park without any props. All good skills that you need to be a safe motorcycle.
In Wales and in England, they've basically dropped the speed limit down to 20 miles an hour, which is 30 kilometres an hour. On a motorbike, what is the minimum speed that you can go to keep upright?
There's a lot of motorcycles these days have digital speed meters. It records a number. If you can slow ride at 3 kilometres an hour, you're doing very well. It's pretty much steady.
That's fantastic.
So if you can ride, stay upright, looking straight ahead, ride in the clutch, which you have to do, maybe even apply the back brake a little bit, you can get the speed down to 3 kilometres. But oftentimes when you're in a queue of traffic in the morning, if you're a commuter, that skill, you're using it all the time, creep along with the rest of the traffic. The 20 miles an hour thing, that is only in urban areas.
Yeah, so that's obviously not on highways.
Yeah. I think you'd have a lot of very bored motorcyclists in that.
Yeah. No, there is a global movement to reduce road deaths from cars and get more people more active, walking, cycling to school. And the simplest way to do that is just bring down the speed limit of suburban roads from, currently they're 50 kilometres an hour. Certainly there are many places across Australia which are bringing them down to 40, where laggards, globally speaking, everywhere else is bringing them down to 30 kilometres an hour. Now, I wanted to ask you, you're on the board of the advisory to the Queensland government? Or
Queensland Motorcycle Council. Yes, I'm on the committee of that. And that's an incorporated organisation set up with 3 executive officers and a committee to lobby all levels of government to make things better for motorcyclists. I'll tell you what, it's an uphill task because we often joke about this, but it's not a very funny joke, really, because you could sum up the state government attitude towards motorcyclists in one word. It's too dangerous. So it's a huge task that we have as a committee representing motorcyclists to swing that attitude around, to actually for them to start encouraging people to ride motorcycles, understanding the benefits of motorcycling, because there are a lot of benefits. There's a report, fully peer-reviewed report called the Leuven report, which is Belgian. They did an in-depth study of how you can literally get rid of all of your congestion in any town by encouraging people to ride motorcycles. 10% of your commuters, if they move from a car to a motorcycle, you reduce congestion by 30%.
40%. Well, I read the one which says if you can get 10% of drivers to bicycles, so I think it must be the same, and they said it would reduce congestion by 40%.
Well, it was specifically looking at motorcycles rather than bicycles, and I think what you would get there is a flavour of the more longer distance type of commute, because I think I used to cycle into work quite a bit, or at least part of anything above sort of 10 or 15 kilometres each way, and you're pushing the envelope a bit for a cyclist.
For sure.
So if you've got a lot of commuters, which you have here in southeast Queensland, commuting up to 100 kilometres to get into work, it's not going to be by bicycle. Motorcycling it's something that the state government particularly doesn't want to know. They sort of basically bung their ears up.
Anything that's not a car, I just go state government, you know. My neighbour across the way, he actually commutes an hour and a half each way. And they're going to move house because that's too far. There is a line, somebody did some analysis and said that most people will commute up to an hour. Once you get to an hour and a half, people decide they need to move or change jobs or something's got to give. And I think that's interesting about what you say, once you get above 10 kilometres. So apparently 7 in 10 journeys within 10 kilometres of home, and those could be done by e-bike. But it's true that if you're someone like my neighbour, where he's going, you know, right to the other end of town, he's an hour and a half in a car, if he could do that on a motorbike, I'm sure he would.
Well, he would be doing society a huge favour if he were to do that, but he would also be reducing his travel time as well. One of the things that the state government has done, which we're very grateful for, is legalise lane filtering. So long as it's done safely, it really is a good thing for the motorcyclists, where you've got heavy congestion, more than one lane, you can ride your motorcycle between the two rows of cars to get to the front. It's taken a while, I think, for car drivers to realise that it's legal for us to do that now. There was a lot of abuse shouted at us when the laws first changed. This, once again, it's state government just not telling folks the way they should. But as time's gone by, I think it's become more well known that it's a legal thing to do, so long as it's done safely.
Actually, one of our listeners from the first 4 episodes, so this will be episode number 5 of our amazing podcast, one of our listeners said he appreciated your comment that this is part of the solution for climate change.
Yes.
There's definitely going to have something to give about cars, that sense of entitlement to the road space and the urban landscape. It is going to have to shift in order to be able to live on the planet. It's one of those things, and people are very reluctant, certainly this auto-obesity where cars are getting bigger and bigger. Actually, that's an interesting question. So in terms of cars getting bigger, motorcycles getting bigger, or how is the road space being navigated between cars and motorcyclists? And you've also talked about this thing, Unrider, I think you called it.
Oh,
So how does that work with accidents? Well, they're not accidents, I'm going to call them collisions. And cars and motorcycles and unriders.
Yeah, we'll talk about unriders separately. We are classed as a vulnerable road user. I have to say that there hasn't been much of a recognition of the fact that we need our own road space. Lane filter is one thing. Things like bicycle lanes and bus lanes, there's a general prohibition on motorcyclists using those, with some exceptions. Transit lanes, there's a few of those around in Brisbane. We are allowed in those. We're one of the few groups or cohorts of road users that are allowed in transit lanes. But I think primarily we just take up the same road space as a car. We just don't need as much of it.
Yeah.
And we can ride side by side two motorcyclists within the space of a lane quite legally. When you look at the amount of space we use and the amount of space we create by being motorcyclists rather than car drivers, it really is quite significant. Unriders was all to do with what we discovered when we looked at a lot of the statistics around motorcycle crashes. A very significant proportion, something like 35% of all injury crashes, either caused by or are involving unriders. These are people who are either unregistered motorcycles, unlicensed, full of drugs, they're criminal lifestyle people who have been in prison loads of times. They are not a typical law-abiding motorcyclist.
I just want to put in a little heads up. So I have a friend who was in jail. It was such a shock for her. It was a complicated situation. So we're not talking about somebody who just ended up in jail as a once-off. This is people who are recidivist, and it is a lifestyle choice.
Yes.
I don't want anybody to feel that because they have gone to jail. People go to jail for a lot of different reasons, and some communities are targeted. Our First Nations people, they are the most incarcerated people in the whole of the planet by head of population, which is just terrible. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about people who have a lifestyle choice of not following the rules.
The prevalence of this cohort of people being involved in crashes that create trauma is significant. It really is. If you actually take those people out of the picture, you start to realise that actually if you're a careful motorcyclist and are obeying the rules and doing the right thing, your risk of having a crash is actually not as high as the government likes to make it. And they'll tell you, you're 30% or 30 times more likely to have trauma if you ride a motorbike, but it isn't true.
I've got an idea.
Okay.
When I met my husband 4 years ago, I posted up on my dating profile and I said, I either come up with completely brilliant ideas or absolutely crazy, stupid ideas, and I just never know which one. And he said the other day, that is 100% true about me. I had this idea as you were speaking, if we were to get more safety on the road for everybody, more equity on the road space, if we were to have lanes so that you had one car lane, one motorcycle lane, you basically get one lane as it currently is, and you cut that in half, and half of that would be for motorcyclists, and half of it would be for bicyclists with their little feet, and you would have scooters, the personal mobility devices, they would be going on that, and also wheelchairs, they would be going in that slower lane, and then you've got footpaths. Has that ever been put forward as an idea, and what do you think about the viability of something like that in terms of trying to shift congestion?
It's certainly a way forward, or it's a possibility. You talk about actually splitting a standard lane in half to cater for a motorcyclist and a cyclist riding side by side. The first thing that comes to my mind in that, you actually have that now, in the sense that you could be a cyclist riding along in a lane and motorcyclists can come along overtake you and share that lane. I mean, obviously, so long as they're giving you the reasonable distance, the 1 metre or the 1.5 metre distance as they actually overtake you, there's a lot of scope for that. What you're talking about is actually marking the road,
formalising
to make the distinction.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea.
Because you said that, and our listener said, getting motorbikes, that reduces congestion, and so do bicycles reduce congestion, and it would actually make it a lot safer.
For car drivers, there's a lot of animosity out there from car drivers towards
anyone who's not a car driver, and in fact everybody else who is a car driver.
But all this traffic.
I know, well, they are the traffic. I guess the thing is that driving a car makes a person very aggressive. So I think that's about it. With regards to helping new motorcyclists, how do people find the group, and what sort of stuff have you got coming up? I'm particularly thinking not only how do they contact you, but you've got a new website coming, I think.
We've got a website that's already open now. Any Google search, just 3 words, Helping New Motorcyclists, will bring up our Facebook page probably first, where most of our interaction happens, and there is a website that's still small but building up, which will complement the Facebook page. Just one thing.
Yep.
You mentioned charity rides.
Yes.
We don't really organise our own charity rides, but there are a lot of annual charity rides that happen. On the 17th of March 2024. It's called the Black Dog Ride. It's a charity that supports depression and suicidal people.
Is that associated with the Black Dog Institute?
Yes,
Okay.
very much. It's a ride that happens all over the country. Different venues basically put on this ride on that particular day. We don't organise it, but we'll be attending the one on the Sunshine Coast hinterland this year. It's usually very well organised. On previous years, they've had up to 500 motorcyclists all on the one ride. That's a big ride, and it's a lot of fun too. It's organised so well that nobody gets lost, and it's probably about a 2-hour ride from start to finish.
Anything else you would like to add? Any concluding notes? So we didn't know at the time of recording what the Facebook and the website addresses were, but I have looked them up, so here we are. It's Helping New Motorcyclists. They haven't got a specific group URL yet for the Facebook group. If you just type in Helping New Motorcyclists Queensland, that will come up. And the website is Helping New Motorcyclists QLD.com. So that's HelpingNewMotorcyclists QLD.com. As always, you've been amazing.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much for everything, John. Thanks for enjoying Streets and People, presented by Get Around Cabo Car Free. We publish our podcast regularly at the usual places and on our website, where you can find out more about us. getaroundcabocarfree.com.au. That's www.getaround, get around, that's pretty straightforward. Cabo, C-A-B-O, that's short for Caboolture. Car Free, C-A-R-F-R-E-E. There's no hyphen in that. .com.au. Our theme music is The Thief on AM Sound, which is just like our cars on our streets, always stealing the space. So let's stop that thief.